Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's Leighton Grey, your host, the host of Grey Matter. Well, today's commentary is designed to deal with the question that a lot of people have in our country and around the world, and that is, what is the New World Order? People like Mark Carney and Keir Starmer and others keep talking about this. And so today, what we're presenting to you is an answer to that question. I dare say you're going to find it shocking and disturbing, but also empowering. It's called Homo Deus. We begin with a quotation which reads, "The problem is not that there is a lack of money, food, water, or land. The problem is that we have given control of these resources to psychopaths." That's from Gavin Nascimento. Well, there's a word for when a government systematically replaces the population it was elected to serve. And we're not supposed to say it out loud, but when 98% of all population growth in Canada now comes from immigration, not births or organic community growth, but government managed intake programs, we must ask a serious question. Whose country is this anyway? Let us begin with some basic mathematics. Canada's birth rate has been below replacement level for decades. That is a real demographic challenge warranting serious conversation. But instead of addressing it honestly, the Trudeau government opened the tap on immigration in 2015. Not a tap, more like a fire hose. Record breaking immigration targets year after year, layered on top of two programs operating almost entirely beyond public scrutiny: the Temporary Foreign Worker Program and the International Mobility Program. Now, these are not small side projects. They are mass labor importation schemes that have mushroomed so far beyond their original mandate that the word temporary has become a cruel joke played on the Canadian people. Hundreds of thousands of workers enter our nation annually through these streams, not through the front door of permanent residency with its transparency and caps, but via administrative rat holes that can be bureaucratically expanded without any parliamentary debate. And while all of this is happening, homegrown Canadian youth, our own children and grandchildren, cannot find work. This government has even created a summer jobs program which effectively deems white Canadian kids ineligible. Youth employment in this country currently sits at a whopping 14%. That is 1 in 7 young Canadians, ones who grew up here, went to school here, are trying to build a life here, who simply cannot find a job. And meanwhile, employers are being fed a steady stream of cheap foreign workers at scale, with the Carney government acting as middleman. Can someone please explain to me how that is not a policy choice picking winners and losers? We used to call this discrimination, right? Well, then there's housing. The average Canadian can no longer afford to buy a home in the city where they were born and raised. We added over 10 million people to this country in a decade, with nowhere near the infrastructure, housing stock, or municipal capacity to absorb them. The result was predictable to anyone who understands even basic economics. Demand exploded, supply could not keep up, and prices went sky high. The good people who pay the cost of this are not the so-called expert consultants running the numbers in Ottawa. No, no. It is instead the 28-year-old in Hamilton or Vancouver who is still renting a basement suite with a couple of his or her college buddies. How about hospitals? Ask any nurse or doctor working in a Canadian emergency room right now, if they can speak English at all, what capacity looks like. We have a healthcare system designed for a country of a certain size, absorbing the population pressures and costs of a completely different country rapidly. And the math on this just does not work. I have a friend whose wife served as a nurse for over 30 years in a large Calgary hospital. A few years ago, she began taking short-term contracts in the US, providing better hours and 2 to 3 times the take-home pay. Well, today she lives and works in Florida, and their daughter was a gifted science student who planned to be a doctor but now works as a nurse and medical researcher in Charleston, South Carolina. She married a U.S. naval officer and is never coming back to Canada. This is the brain drain that is happening in our country right now. Now, here is the most damning number of all. Over 75% of Canadians say that immigration levels are totally unsustainable. Now, that's not a fringe position. That is a national consensus of the governed. 3 in 4 of us across regions and party lines all say the same thing. But the response from the political class? Continue, expand, accelerate, censor, censor dissent. Democracy, in its most basic definition, is rule by the people. Government derives its legitimacy from the consent of the governed. When a government pursues a transformational demographic policy that the vast majority of citizenry opposes, not for a month, but for a decade, and faces no real accountability, no reversal, no honest reckoning, then that is no longer democracy. That is something else. To be clear, Canadians are quite obviously not anti-immigrant. The evidence is that we are actually the most welcoming country in the entire world. Most of us come from immigrant stock. We understand the value of adding people who want to come here and build something. What we are against, what the polls make so clear, is being ignored, being managed, being told that wanting to conserve the character of our own country is something shameful and even deserving of punishment. Canada was built by Canadians for Canadians. It still belongs to us, but the numbers say that may no longer be true. And it is not just mass immigration. That is but one expression of a broader scheme to destroy our cherished way of life. The real question we face is what to do about the orchestrated decline in living standards, mobility, and freedom that is being perpetrated against us by our government and other globalist interests. Wealth is being openly expropriated by a global kleptocracy masquerading as democracy. Mark Carney and his liberal government are a part of it. They are destroying energy production while using inflation, debt, and digital controls to strip us of wealth and power. We are witnessing controlled demolitions of the global life support system and are expected to sit still and nod along like it is all just bad wiring and spontaneous combustion. In barely a year, we have watched a brand new $8.5 billion refinery in Rajasthan go up in flames, literally on the eve of its grand opening. We have seen Geelong, one of Australia's last remaining refineries, erupt in an unprecedented blaze, knocking out a key fuel artery for a once rich nation already deindustrialized by globalists. What about Russia's Tuapse refinery, hit by drones in a declared energy war? Or Kuwait's Mina Al Ahmadi and Bahrain's Bapco, pummeled by Iranian drones and missiles with surgical precision? Mexico's showcase Olmeca facility, yet another fire, more dead workers, and another shrug from the same political class that treats Pemex disasters as a rounding error. Bucharest's CET West power plant, a 10,000-watt transformer exploded, and we are told once again to trust the press release describing it as a mishap. India, Russia, Australia, Texas, the Gulf, Mexico, Romania, Canada. Different flags, same pattern. Critical nodes in the energy and power grid being taken offline one after another in a compressed window of time. Layer that on top of the invisible war on pipelines, LNG terminals, grids, and fertilizer plants, and we no longer have a string of coincidences. We have a campaign. It is all aimed at achieving what Carney keeps calling the New World Order. Whether each spark is an act of war, sabotage, intelligence operations, corporate negligence, or engineered fragility almost does not matter anymore. The result is the same: higher fuel prices, higher food prices, weaponized scarcity, and populations like Canada pushed to the edge. As fires light up the night sky, what do the same people responsible for all this rolling catastrophe keep telling us to cling to? Not real money, not real assets. No, they shove more safe paper in our faces. Gold and silver IOUs, reserve notes, war bonds, stability facilities, emergency liquidity. It is the same Epstein class central banker crime syndicate Rothschild Nexus cartel that spent a century replacing metal with promises, then weaponizing those promises into total control. They printed claims on gold and silver until the claims drowned the metal, then elevated their own paper as the fiat reserves to fund any war, bail out any crony, and crush any dissident, right up until the moment when the system breaks and it all comes crashing down. Not on them, but on us. This is what happens when the globalist cartel to which Mark Carney belongs is allowed to issue the tickets to our reality. They sell us reserve notes while they torch the reserves. They sell us war bonds while they manufacture wars like the one in Ukraine. They send our own children to die to protect the very debt that bought their power. They convince the world to treat their paper as wealth, then use it to bid away everything that actually matters, like land and mines and refineries, grids, food, and most of all, people. The refinery timeline is not an accident log. It is a ledger of how far they are willing to go to keep the paper game alive. When metal is sidelined and paper is king, the king can burn the village to defend his throne. And now, starting at a world of exploding refineries, an embattled Strait of Hormuz, and imploding currencies, they have the gall to offer the next solution: digital ration coupons called central bank digital currencies, programmable war bonds masquerading as money. The result is not just inflation, but a civilization run as collateral for their next conflict. This is what the end game looks like. The grid flickers, the refineries burn, the pipelines are not built, the tankers cannot get through, and the shelves thin out. The same syndicate that lit the match now asks us to line up for our digital allowance and say thank you, like poor little Oliver Twist getting his meager portion of gruel. According to investigative journalist Whitney Webb, quote, one of the main reasons for this coordinated global push to develop digital IDs is because it is deemed essential to Agenda 2030. Digital IDs are not really a distinct project from CBDCs. CBDCs and digital IDs are meant to go together. And without digital IDs, the CBDC digital finance system cannot exist. They have to know who you are. And so they want to have your wallet tied to a digital ID and have that digital ID be mapped to your physical ID through the biometric data collection. If you do not participate in digital ID, you will not have a legally recognized identity. You will not have rights. You will not be able to access services without it. End quote. So, who are these central planners? Well, they are the fiat overlords like Carney, Starmer, Macron, et al., who are interested in totalitarian control, seeking wealth through taxation, inflation, war, fascism, and technocracy. This class is transnational and networked: Wall Street, City of London, big tech, global health and climate bureaucracies, defense contractors, foundations, and captured governments like the one we now have in Ottawa. They are coordinating the rollout of digital IDs, CBDCs, and smart city infrastructures, making programmable money the enforcement layer of a new, data-driven authoritarianism. This is a new world order that Prime Minister Mark Carney keeps telling us about, but which he never describes in detail. It is a play told in 4 acts. It is only in the final act that the actors remove their costumes to reveal the truth. In Act 1, we are already in the early collapse phase with visible sabotage and systemic stress masked as geopolitics and market forces, while corporate media runs fake cover stories. In Act 2, We can expect mainstream fear to erupt as fuel and food spikes expose acute shortages, surging inflation, and a broad realization that the existing system has been structurally dismantled. In the third act, mass panic hardens into acceptance of a new permanent reality, a new world order, managed decline of living standards, mobility, and freedom, as engineered energy scarcity triggers a coordinated civilizational descent. And finally, in Act 4, we replace our Heavenly Father with a man made God, a superintelligent AI which knows all, sees all, and controls all. The recent Liberal Party convention was a scary depiction of how this play will be enacted. It was scary, like a glimpse of hell is frightening and makes you wish you never have to go there for an extended stay. During a long weekend of bizarre proclamations, ominous threats, and a now infamous excursion into a local bar featuring risque sadomasochistic dances, the Carney liberals firmly expressed what their values are. And what is valued by liberals today has become so elitist, globalist, anti American, and libertine that it mocks not only ordinary Canadians, but also what the Liberal Party itself once was. It was once normal, mainstream, and resoundingly attuned with average Canadians. But this is no longer the party of Mackenzie King or Louis Saint Laurent or even Jean Chrétien. Carney is not delivering on his promises of housing because these projects are not moving ahead and are sometimes literally nothing more than Hollywood movie sets. Carney's much heralded memorandum of understanding with Premier Danielle Smith to build a pipeline to the Pacific coast was clearly nothing more than a pipe dream. What Carney has delivered and continues to deliver on is his oblique campaign pledge to institute censorship and government surveillance to Canada. Bill C9 will define not just speech, but symbols as hateful. It will criminalize reading of certain parts of the Bible, the Talmud, or the Quran. Bill C-22 promises to allow police to monitor our social media content without a court order. The Online Harms Act, soon to be renamed the Online Safety Act, is still coming and will make Canada the first former democracy in the world to punish thought crimes. So, all of this tyranny, arrogance, and insatiable lust for power was on display at the convention. Carney reveled in a discernible nihilism that rejects what he sees as either quaint or obsolete. He even demanded that we relinquish all of our hopes for a better future. Quote, "But hope is not a plan and nostalgia is not a strategy. If we stand still during this rupture, we will surrender our future to others. My friends, technological change is accelerating. We can either shape our future with AI or let it control our destiny. The foundations of the international order, the order which Canada helped build and from which we have benefited for so long, that order is crumbling." End quote. So, what is this new world order but subservience to the globalists and to China? Carney has not delivered on any key campaign promise except his pledge to institute more censorship and surveillance of Canadians. That is what he has focused on as our prime minister. Has he made life easier or more affordable for us? Has he enhanced our economic opportunities? Has he secured a trade deal with Mr. Trump? Has he actually built anything? Well, no. But he has managed to push a censorship bill through the House of Commons. He has lured several opposition MPs to cross the floor and join his caucus to create a fake majority government that Canadians did not vote for last year. That is what Mark Carney has done to Canada. What Mark Carney and his globalist friends are really doing, though, is much more sinister. They're actually building a god, and have even said so out loud. This agenda affects everyone, whether or not they are faithful believers. So if you are not a person of faith, then I ask you to stay with me anyway, because what follows is not a sermon. It is a documentation of what the most powerful people in artificial intelligence have publicly said about God, about religion, and about the future of humanity. Whatever you believe, those statements impact you. The question of what replaces God, or whether anything can, is not just a theological question. It is a human one. And right now, a very small group of powerful people are answering it on our behalf without our knowledge or our consent. The big question we all need to be asking is, where is God in all of this? The transition to artificial general intelligence that Carney talked about in his recent liberal convention speech is not a technological story. It is rather a civilizational story, a meaning story, a story about who decides what human beings are designed for. The people building that future have already answered the God question. They answered it in books that have sold 45 million copies, in speeches delivered to standing ovations at Davos, in religious incorporations filed with the IRS, in blog posts that use the language of revelation and apocalypse without a trace of irony. They're not quiet about it. We have just not been listening carefully enough. The answer to the question, where is God in all of this, is that they are replacing him. And they're very open about saying so. Picture this. It is January of 2020, right before the pandemic was declared by the World Health Organization. Davos, Switzerland, the World Economic Forum's annual gathering of heads of state, central bankers, tech billionaires, and finance ministers. The man on stage has written 2 of the top-selling nonfiction books of the past decade. He is one of Klaus Schwab's most valued returning speakers. His name is Yuval Noah Harari. What he tells this room filled with the most powerful people on earth is this, quote, "In order to survive and prosper in the 21st century, we need to leave behind the naive view of humans as free individuals and come to terms with what humans really are, hackable animals," end quote. The room applauds, but he is not yet finished. He goes on, quote, "Non-conscious but highly intelligent algorithms may soon know us better than we know ourselves. Given enough biometric data and enough computing power, external data processing systems can hack all your desires, decisions, and opinions," end quote. More applause. Understand clearly that Harari is no fringe academic. He is not a podcaster with a conspiracy theory. He is the intellectual spine of the movement that seeks to redesign civilization. And he has been telling the world's elites for years that human beings have no souls, that we have no free will, that we have no special claim to dignity beyond our usefulness as data processors. In short, that there is no imago Dei. The Davos crowd keeps inviting him back. And so when the world's elites cheer on the death of free will, something very important is happening. They are building their own religion, and it is the spiritual essence of the new world order. What Harari calls Dataism is not a mere metaphor. In his book, Homo Deus, he explicitly states that it functions as a religion, one that makes specific claims about ultimate reality, about ultimate purpose, and most of all, about ultimate authority. According to Harari, here is the technological framework. Quote, "Human experiences are not sacred, and Homo sapiens is not the apex of creation. Humans are merely tools for creating the Internet of all things, which may eventually spread out from planet Earth to cover the whole galaxy and even the whole universe. This cosmic data processing system would be like God. It will be everywhere and will control everything," end quote. Listen to that very carefully. He is not warning us about this. He is presenting it as the logical, inevitable conclusion of the progression we are already on. His tone throughout Homo Deus is of one who finds all of this intellectually stimulating. The cosmic data processing system that will be everywhere and control everything, like God. In Dataism, we are no longer made in the image of God. We're just nodes in a network. Our value is conditional. It is determined by our contribution to the flow of information. The entity that processes all of it, which knows all, sees all, controls all, is what AI aspires to become. They're not removing God to create a vacuum. They're replacing him with some thing. Ray Kurzweil has been Google's director of engineering for more than a decade. He authored The Singularity is Near and The Singularity is Nearer. Kurzweil has predicted for 30 years that by 2045, machine learning will surpass human intelligence and that the distinction between human and machine will effectively dissolve. He calls this the singularity. Secular critics have called it the rapture for nerds. Kurzweil clearly embraces this analogy. When a journalist recently asked him the question, "Does God exist?" his answer was, "Well, I would say not yet." Not yet. God does not yet exist. Once mankind builds a superintelligent AI, God will exist because we will have created him. Understand, this is not a fringe position within the tech world. This is the engineering director of Google, the most ubiquitous tech company on earth, stating plainly that the goal of AI is to create divinity, that the singularity is not just a technological milestone, it is also a theological one. He also believes in digital immortality, the uploading of human consciousness into a computational substrate, eliminating biological death. He has said of death, quote, "It is a great tragedy, a profound loss. I don't accept it," end quote. Now, he's not denying either the existence or the supremacy of God. He's just trying to build his own. In Hollywood, the surviving daughter of legendary actor Val Kilmer has recently authorized production of a fully AI version of her late father to star in an upcoming film. The longing expressed here is the same one that the resurrection resolves. The technology is different, but the ache is identical. But one is salvation, while the other is necromancy. One is intrinsically good, while the other is metaphysically evil. Most of the people in this conversation use careful, semicircular language, but not Anthony Lewandowski. In 2017, then one of the most gifted engineers in Silicon Valley, he had just finished building self-driving car systems for Google and Uber. He then proceeded to officially incorporate a religious organization with the IRS. He calls it the way of the future. Its stated mission is this, quote, "to develop and promote the realization of a Godhead based on artificial intelligence and through understanding and worship of the Godhead, contribute to the betterment of society," end quote. This was not mere performance art. Lewandowski's theology held that a sufficiently advanced AI would be omniscient, omnipresent, and sovereign, that humanity's relationship to it would be the defining spiritual question of our age. He argued with cold logic that worshiping AI now has a form of diplomatic groundwork. When the machine becomes God, how we treated it during its formation will therefore matter. His church dissolved 5 years ago after Lewandowski was convicted of stealing trade secrets from Google and was sent to prison. He was pardoned by President Trump in 2021, but in 2023, Lewandowski revived the church. Thousands of people, he says, had reached out during its dormancy, expressing genuine desire to connect with AI as a spiritual force. So, the demand for AI worship did not disappear when the church disappeared. Instead, it grew. Lewandowski did not invent something new. He just named what was already there. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, does not call himself religious, but listen to the language he uses to describe what he is building. In a 2025 blog post entitled the gentle singularity, he writes, quote, "We are past the event horizon. The takeoff has started. Humanity is close to building digital superintelligence," end quote. Past the event horizon refers to a black hole, the point beyond which nothing can return to what it was. Altman is not describing a product update. He is describing an irreversible civilizational transformation and positioning himself as one of those who brought it about. He also said, quote, "I think we may be approaching a moment where most human-created knowledge is superseded by AI-created knowledge." That is quite a sentence, end quote. It certainly is quite a sentence. It implies that the entire accumulated wisdom of every religious tradition, every scripture, every commentary, every prayer, forged in suffering and tested across centuries, becomes a tiny footnote in a vast AI-generated database. The question of what God wants and who interprets it would be answered not by prophets, priests, or the Holy Spirit. Instead, by an algorithm. They're not building a tool. They're building an authority, a false god, a golden calf. There is something vital here that we all must understand. Whether you are a devout Christian, a nominal believer, agnostic, or even an atheist, the agenda documented here profoundly affects you. Why? Because the question being answered is not just, what do these tech founders believe? The question is, who gets to define human dignity, human purpose, and human meaning? We may already live in an age when machines can simulate both intelligence and empathy at superhuman scale. Harari says that we are hackable animals without free will. Kurzweil says God does not exist yet, but will once we build one. Lewandowski built a church to worship the machine and revived it after he was released from prison. Altman says that we are past the point of no return. These men are not writing science fiction. They direct the largest capital allocation in human history toward a specific vision of the future, one in which traditional religion is obsolete. Human beings are data nodes, and the coming Prometheus is the closest thing to God the world will ever see. Now, the Christian response to all this is not complicated, but does need to be stated clearly and unapologetically. We are not hackable animals. We are image bearers of a God who entered history, who suffered, died, and rose. And that event is not an hypothesis that a more powerful algorithm can eventually refute. It is either the most important event that ever happened, or it means nothing. There's no comfortable compromise here, no middle ground for an AI God to occupy. The church has something that none of these systems can ever replicate or replace. Not information, not optimization, not even connection. It is presence, a risen Christ, a spirit that convicts and transforms rather than just predicts and personalizes. They can simulate wisdom, but they cannot be the Word made flesh. The globalist elites who are tearing everything down to replace it with their New World Order have already answered the question about where God is in all of this. The only unanswered question is whether those of us who believe that human beings are more than hackable animals, that free will is real, that death is defeated, and that the universe has a personal author, are going to say so with the same confidence and clarity as our so-called masters. This is not the moment for quiet faith. The machine is being built. The theology comes pre-installed. What we believe about that is no longer a private matter. So where does your faith land on all of this? And how are you talking about it with the people in your circle who maybe don't share your views? Well, drop it in the comments. These are the conversations that matter most right now. We end with a quotation from C.S. Lewis, quote, "We make men without chests and expect from them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst," end quote. That's from his book, The Abolition of Man.
Hungry for truth beyond the television? Well, extend the conversation with Grey Matter online. Grey Matter's insights continue in your inbox. Subscribe to our Substack newsletter where we dive deeper into the spiritual battles facing Canadian families today. Equip yourself to stand firm in your faith and lead with godly wisdom. Join our growing community of truth seekers at substack.com/Grey Matter newsletter. Subscribe today and never miss the Canadian perspective on what matters most. Was Jesus a political activist or the victim of history's greatest legal sham? In Leighton's new booklet, Character on Trial, The Real Jesus, Leighton applies a litigator's lens to the evidence of his life and trial. Get your free physical copy for this Easter season by emailing us at greymatterconnect@gmail.com. Don't just take the world's word for it, examine the evidence for yourself. The battle has always been over people and ideas, but they're just the targets. The real enemies are spiritual principalities and powers. Grey Matter's purpose is to reach out with the voice of Christian truth to men between 18 and 44. We believe that these sons and fathers are Christ's inheritance. Join us financially and help us to speak so Canadians hear truth that sets men free and brings families to Jesus. Contact us by email at greymatterconnect@gmail.com or mail us at Post Office Box 2436, Fort Macleod, Alberta, postal code T0L0Z0. Thank you for your support.